Welcome to the Killer Innovation Show, the longest continuously produced podcast in history. Each week, Phil McKinney brings you the insights and strategies to amplify your creativity and innovation skills. Here's your host, Phil McKinney.
Hey, welcome to the studio. Just wrapping up some sketches here. Today's topic is on strategic thinking. Given today's world with all the news happening and everything constantly changing, a question that I get quite often is, how do you deal with this unexpected? Well, you don't have to deal with it. The key is, do you plan for it? So what you find out in the general world is most people are just scrambling to adapt to whatever the unexpected is, whatever the morning's headline is. However, there are a select few people that are already 3 steps ahead of everybody. They saw the change coming, they prepared for it, and they position themselves to benefit from it. But how do they do that? What's their strategic weapon? What is that secret weapon that they have? It is their thinking skills, specifically their strategic thinking skills. So I've put together this episode, and by the end of this episode, you'll master what I think are the 6 most powerful strategic thinking skills. And I'm going to give you 5 practical frameworks, exercises on how to apply this to your decision-making abilities. Not just the skills, but the important part here is, how do you apply it? You'll develop the same mental toolkit used by all these people that are out there, that people get tagged as visionary leaders and innovative thinkers. They don't have special insight. They do dedicate the time to think deeply, and to apply their strategic thinking skills. And you'll discover exactly how to apply them. This isn't just a theoretical sit back and learn. This is really about, how do you spot the opportunities that others miss, and how do you avoid the pitfalls that trap even the smartest people? So let's start off, but before we dive into the specific techniques, let's get it clear on what strategic thinking actually is. Unlike tactical thinking, which focuses on immediate tasks, or operational thinking, which concentrates on efficiencies and processes, strategic thinking is about seeing the big picture and, most importantly, in my mind, a longer time frame. Think of it like this. Tactical thinking is playing the next move in chess. Operational thinking is mastering the rules and standards and the standard patterns that you see in a chess game. But strategic thinking is understanding the entire board and planning several moves ahead. How do you become a master chess player? By applying that strategic thinking. How do you become a grandmaster in the business world? Is your strategic thinking skills. Developing a strategic mindset starts with training yourself to look beyond the immediate outcomes. When faced with the decision, push yourself to consider its implications, not just tomorrow, but months and even years into the future. Now, this sounds simple, but it is surprisingly rare to find people who can think strategically. Think consistently, and who've honed this skill. Most people just get caught in the urgency of the moment. They are reacting, not being prepared, and therefore getting caught off guard. The strategic mindset includes really 4 key elements. One is, you need a long-term orientation. You need looking beyond just the immediate outcomes. 2, pattern recognition, connecting the dots across different domains. 3, comfort with uncertainty, making decisions with incomplete information. And this is the number one thing I see with new executives, being unable or uncomfortable at making a decision, making good decisions when you don't have all the information, you don't have all the data. Face it, you never will. And then proactive approach. shaping circumstances rather than just responding to them. If you apply strategic thinking, you can actually steer what's going on to your advantage. Now, once you shift from reacting to anticipating, you start to design the game rather than just playing the game. But how exactly do you develop these abilities? That's what we're going to explore next with the 6, what I think are the most important strategic thinking skills that really form the foundation. So let's talk about skill number 1, second order thinking. This first skill in second order thinking is something that most people, I think most people do it, they just don't consider it. But most people just focus on the immediate results of their actions. That's the first order effect. If I make this decision, this happens. Strategic thinkers ask, and then what? That's the second order. So let me give you an example. When streaming services first appeared, many film studios only saw the first order effect. Wow, a new revenue stream. And they licensed their content. However, Netflix, thinking several steps ahead, saw the second order effect. By gathering data on viewing habits and building a relationship with viewers, they could eventually create their own content and reduce dependencies on the studios. While studios were playing checkers, Netflix was playing chess. To practice second order thinking, get in the habit of asking yourself a series of questions after your initial analysis. Some of these questions could be, well, if we do X, what happens next? And after that, what happens? How much these circumstances impact other factors of our business, our industry, our competitors? And then, what feedback loop might emerge over time? Netflix really tuned in on using viewer data. So every film you feed in and watch on Netflix, they use that to prioritize the new scripts that they're going to select based on what people are watching today. That feedback loop is hugely, hugely powerful. Now, this example discipline forces you to trace the consequences through the systems over time. And that's the key. It's not the immediate decision. It's about thinking beyond what happens next and what's the impact of that and what happens next. Skill number 2, probabilistic reasoning. This is a thinking in terms of likelihoods rather than certainties. Look, we all like to have certainties. If I do this, this will happen. If I do this, that will not happen. Life doesn't work that way. Our brains naturally want yes, no answers, but reality, I don't know about you, rarely obliges. Instead of asking, will this work? Try just wording it a little bit differently. What is the likelihood this will work and under what conditions? This shifts you from binary thinking to a more nuanced view that accounts for uncertainty. A practical way to develop this skill is to keep a decision journal. Write down important decisions you make along with your initial estimate of how likely various outcomes are. And over time, review these notes to calibrate your judgment. Look, nobody has that perfect gut. Nobody has that perfect analysis that says, there's a 71% chance this is going to become true. You take your gut, assign a number, see what happens, go back, calibrate. What should you or could you have seen to give you a more accurate feel of what the likelihood that something was going to happen? And as you get more experience and you go back and you create this historical data, you will calibrate your judgment and you will get better and better at being able to predict what the likelihood is. And you're never going to have something that's 100% or 100% the only decisions you make. Sometimes you got to make a gut and make a decision when maybe something is 50-50. Skill number 3, opportunity cost assessment. This opportunity cost assessment is really that understanding that every yes means saying no to something else. Resources are always limited, whether that's money, time, people. Strategic thinkers habitually ask, if I pursue this option, what am I giving up? This question prevents the common trap of chasing good opportunities at the expense of great opportunities. To practice this skill, whenever you're making a significant decision, force yourself to list at least 3 alternatives you're giving up by choosing your preferred option. You can't do everything. 2 arms, 2 legs, 24 hours a day. Certain laws of physics, we just have not figured out how to get around. Now, this asking yourself and listing those 3 alternatives that you're giving up, this creates the mental habit of seeing these hidden trade-offs. And everything has a trade-off. If I stop at the store on the way home, am I going to be late for dinner? That's a trade-off. If I choose to do this side hustle, what am I giving up? If I choose to work on this project, I don't have as many resources for that project. It's always these hidden trade-offs, and 99% of the people never consider them. Skill number 4, inversion thinking. Now, inversion thinking is somewhat counterintuitive. Instead of asking how to succeed, ask how you might fail. Imagine you're launching a new product. Rather than just planning for success, ask yourself, a year from now, if this project has failed miserably, totally gone nose down in the dirt, what will have caused that failure? This perspective reveals potential problems you might otherwise miss. This approach, sometimes called pre-mortem, not post-mortem, pre-mortem, think about it ahead of time, is remarkably effective at exposing blind spots in your thinking and strengthening your plans, strengthening the overall process of getting this product into the marketplace. Skill number 5, scenario development. Scenario development is one that's been around for a while, but it's really your ability to envision multiple possible futures. Look, I have spent the majority of my last 30 years of my career has been focused in a good chunk, probably 30% of my job is looking out and trying to predict the future. For years, for decades, I would do a end of December video. You can go find them online at HP or on the Cable Lab site, predicting the future. Now, I was pretty good at it after a while. You kind of get tuned into it, but you're never 100%. Scenario says that there's multiple futures, and it's never a single predetermined path. This range of possibilities creates multiple paths, and you're keeping your eyes open as to which path is emerging or not emerging. Strategic thinkers don't try to predict exactly what's going to happen. In fact, if someone says they know the future, the one thing you will know for sure is that they're going to be wrong. They good, honorable, honest, high integrity strategic thinkers know and will not try to predict exactly what will happen or convey that they know exactly what will happen. Instead, they identify a few distinct possible futures and they prepare for each. You prepare for all of them. This whole process really creates resiliency and adaptability, because if maybe that future starts to become the most likely, well, you've already thought about it. You've already prepared for it. Now, to practice the skill, identify the 2 or 3 major uncertainties in a situation, such as, is the regulatory environment in Washington, D.C. going to change? Is the interest rates on business loans going to go up? What's the issues with intellectual property law change? There's all kinds of uncertainties. Pick 3 and then imagine how different combinations of outcomes might play out and how you could think differently about it. Don't aim for dozens of scenarios. Just a few meaningful alternatives that cover the range of possibilities that are important to you. And then keep track of it. Keep them in front of you. And then as you maybe look at them weekly or monthly, go out and test which one is the most likely one that is starting to emerge. And then based on that, then you know which one to focus on. But the fact that you've thought about it, you thought about those impacts, you've prepared yourself to be resilient no matter what happens across these three big things out there that could come in and impact you. That is what is one of the key benefits of having that long view, that forward view in strategic thinking. And then skill number 6, first principles analysis. We've talked about this. We've talked about it many times. I talked about it in my episode of my meetings. Give you one example. I've had multiple meetings with Elon, but there's an episode out there of just one of my meetings going into a little bit more detail. I've done episodes on first principles thinking, which is one of Elon's core skill sets that really differentiates. But this first principles, really, what is it? It's breaking down complex situations down to fundamental truths rather than relying on analogies or conventions or assumptions. It's the fundamental. Think about it's almost down to the level of the fundamental law of physics. So, for instance, when Elon approached rocketry, he didn't start with the assumption that using rockets to put things up in space is expensive. He asked, how do we do it? What are the materials? What are the processes? What are the things that drive that cost? And then what is it that they can do on a first principles approach on how they could do it differently, like reusable rockets, and therefore totally transform what it means to go to space. Now, to practice this skill, when facing a challenge, ask yourself, what are the fundamental truths that I know with certainty about this situation? And build your thinking up from these foundations and ask yourself, how do I change it? How could it be different? How could it be different? And then you start from those foundations rather than starting with assumptions or conventional wisdom, like, you put a rocket up, but then it's thrown away and you rebuild a new rocket for the next launch, which is what we've been doing since the beginning of rocketry. You challenge yourself. Now, we talked about the 6, what I think are the most important skills individually. Now, you might be wondering, how do they work together in practice? So let's look at how these abilities combine to create truly strategic thinking. Now, in reality, the power of strategic thinking emerges when these 6 skill sets work together. There are no complex challenges that can be solved with just one approach. Instead, strategic thinkers draw from this toolkit, applying different skills as the situation demands. Let's go back to thinking about chess. Chess grandmasters don't just rely on calculating the next move, which would be tactical thinking, but combines pattern recognition from past games with scenario planning about future moves, all while assessing the opportunity costs of different strategic options. So, this grandmaster applies 3 of the 6. Similarly, you'll find yourself naturally combining these skills. When evaluating a major decision, you might start with second-order thinking. Go beyond not just the immediate impact of the move, think beyond it. Then apply probabilistic reasoning to assess various outcomes. What's the most likely this is going to happen, or what's the most likely that's going to happen, while using inversion thinking to identify potential pitfalls. So how do you develop these skills into habits that you can apply automatically? That's what we're going to explore next. I've got 5 practical exercises to strengthen your strategic thinking muscle. And these aren't what I would call straight exercises. These are examples, exercises, mindsets on applying strategic thinking to some of the more likely things that you're going to apply them to. So let's jump in. So these 5 cover a whole range of areas. The first one up is one that we've talked about a little bit before already, and that's pre-mortem. This is going to take in inversion thinking and second order thinking to really apply. So before starting an important project, imagine that it has failed completely. Spend 10 minutes writing down all the reasons for the failure. Not that it did fail. Think about it. A year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years, this thing goes face down. What would be the most likely reasons why that failed? You couldn't get funding, regulatory environment changed, competitors did something, right? Spend 10 minutes, write down all the reasons for the failure. Now, this exercise leverages both inversion to expose potential problems before they occur. To conduct really an effective pre-mortem, vividly imagine the project does fail 1 year from now. List as many potential causes of failure as possible. Be specific of what went wrong and why. Prioritize the most likely or impactful failure points. Now, this most likely is what? You're going to rank it saying, okay, this one's got a 70% chance of being the reason. This has a 20% chance of being the reason. And now think through that exercise and think about how would you prevent that failure from happening? What would you do differently? What would be the scenarios in which that would happen? And how do you plan for that so that you're ahead on the thinking before the failure even emerges? Okay, that's exercise number 1. Exercise number 2 is what I call the 10-10-10 analysis. This is using second order thinking and opportunity cost assessments. So when you're making a decision, ask yourself how you feel about this decision 10 minutes from now, 10 months from now, 10 years from now. 10, 10, 10. 10 minutes, 10 months, 10 years. This forces you to consider different time horizons and avoids our natural human habit of short-term thinking. The power of this exercise lies in identifying decisions that might feel good in the moment, but cause regret later on. Or conversely, decisions that feel difficult now, but will prove invaluable in the long run. And apply that. When you get ready to make a decision, any decision, apply the 10-10-10 and see if you do feel differently. If you do feel differently, ask yourself, why? What's holding me back from making this decision? It's uncomfortable now because I've got to do something maybe with resourcing or budgets or whatever. But thinking about it in the 10 minutes, 10 months, 10 years, you get the feel for why am I uncomfortable and forcing yourself to really think about what decision you should make. Exercise number 3, future back planning. Future back planning. Now, this uses scenario development and first principles analysis. How to do this? Start by clearly defining a desired future state. Then work backwards to identify what would need to happen to reach it. Some people refer to this as backcasting. You go out, position yourself some point in the future, 3, 5, 8, 10 years out, and then backward cast and then lay out all the pieces and all the steps. What is it going to take for that to be successful, for you to reach that state? Then this approach often reveals steps or requirements that forward planning totally misses. So if you want to be the future state where you've achieved something, or you've dominated a new market that you've been desiring, whatever, position yourself there, think back, and you more than likely you're going to uncover something that forward normal traditional planning activities would totally miss. So for example, if you want to become a senior executive in 5 years, you from a career perspective, you want to be a senior executive, work backwards to identify the skills, the experiences, the relationships you need to develop along the way to be successful. Lay all that out, and now think about what do you need to do to make sure you make those happen. If you do forward thinking, you're only thinking about the next step. Well, the next step is I need to get skills. So I'm going to do an internship, or I'm going to do some of my own personal projects to build up my project portfolio, right? So that if you do that, you're going to get stuck in the serialization. Forwardcast to the future, then backward plan. That allows you to kind of see the bigger picture. That is strategic thinking, seeing that bigger picture. Exercise number 4, perspective shifting. Now, this is using probabilistic reasoning and first principles analysis. So in this case, when you're stuck on a problem, try viewing it from drastically different perspectives. You've heard me use the term fresh eyes. We always need to be thinking about, how do I look at the problem differently? Because we all get caught in a rut. Our experiences, our expertise, schooling, whatever, we get caught in these ruts. How do you change that perspectives to see something fresh? So you ask yourself, how would a competitor see this situation? How would a customer see this situation? Someone from a completely different industry came in and did this analysis. This exercise breaks you out of that fixed thinking pattern by forcing you to consider alternative viewpoints and probabilities you might otherwise miss. And so therefore, it can be immensely revealing. Now, in my case, I do this myself, but I also take a problem to somebody that's not familiar with an industry or the technology and just have a conversation with them and ask them questions. Don't try to pitch them. Don't do that. Ask them questions. That jumps into exercise number 5, which is strategic questioning. Now, this is basically using all 6 of the strategic thinking skills. And this is incorporating questions into your thinking routine. Questions such as, what am I missing? Well, that improves your probabilistic reasoning. What am I missing on what could not go or could cause this to be an issue, or the most likelihood of what's going to happen? I need data or more information to be able to determine what's the probability that X is going to happen. What would change my mind about this? So I'm thinking this, I've made this decision, but what would change my mind? Well, that is challenging, or the challenges of first principles. Did I make a decision based on an assumption? If I attack that assumption, is it different? Next is, what would make this decision look foolish in retrospect? This is inversion thinking. If I make this decision and then 3 years from now I look back, what would make this decision look foolish in hindsight? Next question is, what's the non-obvious solution here? Now, this is really prompting for second order thinking, right? Stopping at not that immediate decision, but if I make this decision, what's next? If I make that decision, what's next? Getting beyond just kind of the shoelaces and being able to get your head up and looking out towards that future. Another one is, what am I giving up by choosing this? So this is opportunity costs. And we should always be thinking about opportunity costs because everything has an opportunity cost. You choose to sleep in rather than working on your book, that's an opportunity cost. You choose to do a side hustle, the opportunity cost is time with your kids. Everything has opportunity costs. Think about that. Another one is, how might different futures affect this decision? So how the outcome of an election, the merger of 2 companies, finding a spouse, how might different futures affect whatever decision? This is scenario development. And you can apply scenario development to everything, whether it's scenarios for choosing kids to go where your kids are going to go to college, to finding a spouse, to what companies you should work for, and think about that from a career perspective. So I would encourage you, think about scenarios more broadly than just the business problems. Now, the key to all these exercises is consistency. Even 5 minutes of strategic thinking practice every day will over time reshape your default thinking patterns. It'll just become second nature, to become automatic. But how do you incorporate these practices into your busy life? My life is busy. I've got a full-time job, more than a full-time job as a CEO. I have my studio doing work and advising companies and entrepreneurs and people that I'm willing to invest some time in. I'm doing content creation for the channel for you. I'm a busy person, but all of us can find a little bit of time in practice and build up our exercise. So let's talk about how you do that. The true test of any skill is whether you use it in daily life. But here's how to make strategic thinking a natural part of your routine. Start small. Don't try to transform your daily routine with a big long list and checklist or whatever. Do not try to apply strategic thinking to every decision. You will quickly burn out and you won't make any decisions. Instead, choose one significant decision each day for a little bit of a deeper analysis. This might be a work decision, a financial choice, or even a relationship issue. There are 4 really what I would consider effective ways to integrate strategic thinking into your daily routine. 1, create triggers for strategic thinking. So, for example, whenever you use phrases like I always or I never, pause and ask if you're falling into rigid thinking patterns. I always do this, or I always make this decision when this happens. Or whenever you feel pressure to decide quickly, someone saying, hurry up, I need to make a decision right away. Take a breath and ask what would happen if you delayed the decision by a day. 10 minutes, 10 months, 10 years. Could be 2 minutes, 2 days, 2 months, right? What happens if you delay the decision by a day? 2, find a strategic thinking partner. Have someone to discuss decisions with that dramatically improves your thinking quality. Look for someone who thinks differently than you do, is not just like you. Find someone who looks at things completely different from you. That friction between perspective often generates insights neither person would reach alone. 3, schedule dedicated strategic thinking time, even 15 minutes once a week. We're talking about 15 minutes out of 7 days. That can make a difference. Use this time to consider long-term questions or review important decisions. 4, practice reflection. After making important decisions, take note of what went well and what you might do differently next time. This will build your strategic muscle and your confidence in the decisions you make in strategic thinking. Now, balance is crucial. Strategic thinking doesn't mean getting lost in analysis paralysis, which is very easy to do. Sometimes a quick decision is better than a perfect one made too late. The goal is appropriate thinking, matching your mental effort to the importance of the decision. And perhaps most importantly, be patient with yourself. Strategic thinking is a lifelong journey. It's not a decision. You will have days when you fall back into reactive thinking, and that's okay. We all do it. The goal is progress, not perfection. And you can't operate in strategic thinking 24/7. Know when it's appropriate and then apply the appropriate skills to the problem, opportunity, decision that you're trying to make. And speaking of progress, let's wrap up the most important takeaways from today. So let's take a step back and review. We've covered a lot of ground in this episode, from understanding the strategic mindset to developing specific skills and practices. But here are the key points to remember. Strategic thinking isn't about predicting the future. It's about preparing for multiple possible futures and positioning yourself for whatever happens. Your strategic thinking toolkit includes the strategic mindset, long-term orientation, pattern recognition, comfort with uncertainty, and proactive thinking, not just lean back, engaging. The 6 core skills, 6 most important skills in strategic thinking is first up, second order thinking, probabilistic reasoning. Third is opportunity cost assessments. 4 is inversion thinking. 5 is scenario development. 6, first principles analysis. Now, I've also given you 5 powerful exercises, basically structures that you can apply to a whole variety of different things that you're working on. And it's really designed to give you a framework to start with so that you can learn when to apply and when to mix and match the different skill sets. We talked about the pre-mortem. We talked about the 10-10-10 analysis, 10 minutes, 10 months, 10 years. We talked about future back planning, catch yourself in the future, look back. We talked about perspective shifting, get fresh eyes. How would your customers, competitors, others from outside your industry think about this? Strategic questioning, asking really good questions, and that being able to then apply and think about all 6 skills against whatever problem you're working on. Now, integration in your daily life happens gradually. Start with 1 decision per day and just build from there. Your challenge for this week is to choose just one of the strategic thinking skills we've discussed and apply it to an important decision you're facing. Notice how it changes your perspective and possibly even your choice. Now, as we wrap up, thanks for staying with me all the way to this point in the episode. If you found value in the strategic thinking concepts, please hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell so you don't miss future episodes. Also, give us that thumbs up, give us the like. Your likes really help us in the algorithm to make this content visible to others who could benefit from it. If you'd like to support the creation of new content like this, our thinking skills or think like, or the work that we're doing here in the studio, applying these thinking skills to your creativity, to your innovation efforts, then the best way is to become a patron over on Patreon, or by becoming a paid subscriber to Studio Notes newsletter over on Substack. You'll find the links in the show notes below or in the comments. So check that out, find those, and support us. Now, as I've said in the past, none of the funding that comes in through this comes to me. It actually pays for the staff behind the scenes that does editing of the videos and editing of the audios and does all the things that happen behind the scenes that really make this available. If I had to do it all by myself, we'd be lucky if we could get 1 show out a month if we were lucky. So throw a little bit of money into the pot, helps cover the cost for doing that, and we can keep up at a pretty good pace. Now, remember, strategic thinking at its heart isn't just about making better decisions. It's about creating options, understanding that future. It's optional futures, and it's really about creating options for your future self. So every time you think strategically, you're investing in possibilities that your future self will thank you for. So until next time, keep thinking ahead. Be looking to the future and make those changes and make those decisions and do it the right way, applying your strategic thinking skills. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Podcasting nonstop since 2005, this has been the Killer Innovation Show on the Innovators Network.